Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Going to round up two pieces of news in this video. Wladimir Klitschko is not coming back for Dillian Whyte. The rumours are not true. We'll get to that. Some thoughts, as well as Luis Ortiz hasn't heard from Oleksandr Usyk's camp. He had been in the conversation to fight the Ukrainian, but apparently no contact, no communication, no nothing. So probably not going to happen. We'll get to that too. Buckle in. Let's go. So we'll start with the news of Wladimir Klitschko. Steve Bunce, you can see on screen here, this was from the BBC. He had said Klitschko was coming out of retirement and he was going to face a big British name. And the sort of reading between the lines, because he didn't say Dillian Whyte, but reading between the lines, it could only be Dillian Whyte for the sort of fight that Bunce was talking about that could happen. And there was speculation it could be for Wembley on April the 13th. So Bunce, this rumour has completely been busted. It's been proved as false. And Wladimir Klitschko, through Sports Illustrated, is labelling it fake news. Wladimir Klitschko tells at SI Now, Sports Illustrated Now, that there is no truth to the rumours that he could end his nearly 2-year retirement to face Dillian Whyte this spring. In a text message, Klitschko calls Whyte chatter fake news. So I guess Dillian Whyte and Wladimir Klitschko will not be happening, and that was a fight that Whyte was open to. He thought that he could bust up and break down Wladimir Klitschko, stop him with some body shots, said Klitschko doesn't like it to the body. He sparred him before, and that was something that he would take into the fight was body shots. Thought he could get a decent stoppage with that. But what sort of got to me about this tweet, and it's kind of the things that are unsaid here. This is very specific to the Dillian Whyte chatter. Not so much that he's not coming back, because that's something that Wladimir Klitschko has been hinting at for some time. We've had sparring clips. He said publicly that he wouldn't mind being the oldest heavyweight champion, and if he could come back for the right fight, all that sort of stuff. That's been bubbling along for about 6 months now. So he hasn't closed the door to coming back, but obviously he's closed the door on this chatter about a Whyte fight this spring in the United Kingdom. So it's very interesting, Klitschko keeping his options open, because imagine if a Tyson Fury fight, hypothetically, it popped up. You'd imagine unfinished business there, lost to Fury the first time around. He may want to try come back and, really sort of rewrite that chapter and try to get a win over Fury. And if a Joshua fight was presented to him again, now that he's got the sort of burning desire back, he wants to potentially come back to the division. That could be something that could be of interest too. He wants to come back for a big fight, but who knows what will happen with Wladimir Klitschko. He's not ruling out a comeback, but what he is ruling out here, very obviously, as fake news, is Dillian Whyte. So we'll have to see what happens with Wladimir Klitschko. But I guess it begs the question, where did Steve Bunce get this rumour from? Because obviously Klitschko has categorically denied it out of hand. And often when pundits and analysts come out with these sorts of predictions so boldly that Klitschko could be coming back and it's for a big British name, not Fury and not Joshua, you can only think it was going to be Dillian Whyte. And it's turned out to be complete rubbish. So we'll have to just take with a grain of salt what Steve Bunce says, but that is kind of what happens in these situations. There's a lot of rumours, a lot of speculation about what will happen in the division, and Klitschko himself has been fueling it with the talk of a potential comeback. He's never said anything concrete in terms of when he would come back, but just that he's sort of mulling it over and would come back for the right fight, potentially. On to the next piece of news. Luis Ortiz's manager. No one has contacted us on a Usyk fight. There had been a lot of talk about Luis Ortiz being in the sort of conversation for a Usyk fight along with Alexander Povetkin. And that was fueled by Usyk's promoter, Oleksandr Usyk, who said that there was a 70% chance that Usyk would face either Ortiz or Povetkin. And obviously, if Luis Ortiz hasn't been contacted, it can't be him. And when that news about Ortiz being in the conversation there came out, I did express a bit of skepticism about, was he really in the picture? Just because, he's kind of in the wrong promotional stable here, especially to be on a matchroom card, which would likely be if it was going to be in the UK at about the time that they were saying Usyk would have his heavyweight debut. But, who knows what will happen and when with Usyk. But Ortiz's manager, he is saying, no one has called us. I've noticed that everyone uses Luis's name as hype, and then they disappear. We would fight Usyk any day of the week. Personally, I think Usyk is really good, but I think he could use a couple of fights at heavyweight before stepping up. And that's how many people feel about Oleksandr Usyk and his potential move to heavyweight, because it's a very different kettle of fish from boxing against guys who are about your same height and dimensions, under 200 pounds, whereas over the weight limit, where there is no weight limit, you never know what you're going to get. There's some tool timber much bigger than Usyk has been boxing of late. A couple of fights to acclimate, for me, that would be a very logical strategy. But that's why I think guys like Alexander Povetkin, Carlos Takam, smaller heavyweights, they could be in line to face Oleksandr Usyk. So we'll have to see what happens there. But yeah, Luis Ortiz, it's an interesting case about what's going to happen with him, because if he's not in the conversation here for Usyk, and Joe Joyce, that fight, there seems to be nothing concrete yet. Joe Joyce's manager is saying 95% chance this year. But what does that really mean? And there has been some talk and chatter online, including from a few media sources, suggesting that Luis Ortiz, his next fight date, could be in March in a card in New York that will also feature Erislandy Lara. So we'll have to see what happens there with Luis Ortiz. And there is also that other potential option of Dominic Breazeale, should other things fall into place. And what I mean by that is, if Wilder and Fury fight, they'll have to take care of Breazeale. And if Dillian Whyte, the #1 WBC contender, faces Anthony Joshua, if Breazeale gets an interim title shot, because his mandatory status will have to be dealt with by the WBC in their ruling on the Wilder-Fury rematch, then they will deal with that situation, and that could mean an interim title fight. It's a bit complicated, but it could happen, and Ortiz probably not going to sign anything until he knows what's happening with other dominoes to fall in the division. But obviously it's not going to be Oleksandr Usyk if he hasn't even been contacted. And it's looking increasingly likely, just by some of the stuff that Alexander Krassyuk, Usyk's promoter, is saying, that if you take Ortiz out of the picture, the only name left, the one that they've had some discussions with, or seemingly had discussions with, is Alexander Povetkin. And that would be a great fight. Be interesting to see what card it is on. There's talk it would be on the April 13th card at Wembley. For Usyk, that'd be a great sort of exposure. Dangerous fight, but we'll have to see. Maybe he will want to take a fight that's maybe a step down from a Povetkin, but who knows? It's boxing. Anything can and does happen, and sometimes it doesn't happen in the case of Luis Ortiz. But what do you make of it all? Luis Ortiz hasn't been contacted for a Usyk fight. Speculation he could be fighting in March. And Wladimir Klitschko flat out denying rumours of a Dillian Whyte fight, but not denying that he may come back. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.